This is Suzanne Stumbo, and I'm the agriculture agent for Pike County. And one thing that we see has great potential for eastern Kentucky is the production of bees and honey. The United States uses over 60,000 tons of honey each year, and at the same time the U.S. imports more than 40,000 tons. It has great potential for eastern Kentucky.
So my name is Tammy Horn, and I am Kentucky State Apiarist, and I've been invited to present a basic beekeeping course going over some basic components. And so what I thought I would start today are the three things that every beekeeper needs. And first among those is a veil. And when bees want to sting, they want to generally go to the oxygen trails. So a veil is first and foremost, and whether that's something like this, which I can then just kind of pull over my baseball cap whenever I jump out of the truck, or whether that's something a little bit more sustained, like a beekeeping jacket with a veil to it. Every beekeeper needs something like this. Now, many times I judge the need for a veil and what I need to wear by the kind of chore that I'm doing. So if I am having to replace a queen in a fully established hive that I've had for 4 or 5 years, then I'll go ahead and I'll put this on. But if I'm just jumping into the hive to check and see that I've got a laying queen or to see what it needs, then many times I'll just wear something like this. But always, 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 I tell everybody, you always need to have a veil around of some type or regardless of how extensive your bee wear is. The second thing that a beekeeper needs is a smoker. And many times for beginners, I recommend that they start with a fuller chimney rather than a short one. I think sometimes it's a little easier to get this started. And also, when it is started, it tends to stay lit longer. And this is important because if you are in a job like requeening a hive, you don't want your smoker to go out on you right in the middle of it, and you have to stop and light your smoker, and you have bees flying around. So I generally tend to tell beekeepers, like, for $5 more, this is going to be easier to start and it's going to last longer. And so that's my recommendation for beginners. And one of the tricks I like to tell people when they're lighting a smoker is to take a sheet of paper. I generally take the center sheet of a newspaper section, one that's just 1 ply. And then what I do is I make a ball at the very bottom of it. But you don't want to wrap the whole sheet into a ball. What you're wanting to do is to kind of get something here that you can light, and then you want to leave a type of flue, I call it, kind of like a chimney here. And then you put the ball into the chimney here, and that's what you light. You light this ball that you've made. And then as the flames are beginning to go up, you're taking your hive tool, you're kind of tucking this down, and then you're adding, I like to use pine needles because they have oil in them and they're free, and it makes a really nice, cool smoke for the bees. It's not a hot smoke. But while these flames are coming up on this flue, then I'm adding my fuel and my tinder. And then of course you're having to puff the bellows to give it the oxygen that it needs. So this is actually a really handy tip when it comes to lighting smokers and keeping them lit. A lot of times people will just start with straight lint or other types of smoker fuel. Sometimes I find that's harder to light. But things like pine needles, like I said, it's free. They make a really nice smoke, and they have oils in them, so it makes it easier to light. Rosemary, dead rosemary is another good tinder to use. Sage is a nice one to use. Any of those plants that have essential oils in them are a good thing to use for your smoker fuel. So that's the second thing, veil, smoker. And the reason why we use a smoker, just to remind people, is that the smoke causes the bees to eat honey, and you want to give that smoke time to work. I mean, many people tend to confuse this with a flame blower. It is not a weapon. It is a tool. And you want to kind of think about letting that smoke work for about 30 minutes, right? I mean, I think many beginners, they get this thing all hot and it's spewing embers and they go straight into the hive, and really they're making the bees angry at that point. But if you get a nice cool smoke going, you smoke the bees, go get your stuff, come back, smoke the bees, go put on your veil, come back, smoke the bees, give that smoke 30 minutes to work, let those bees eat that honey and get their bellies full of honey, then they are less likely to sting. The other reason that we use smoke is that it neutralizes our chemicals that we're wearing. So, many of us, we brush our teeth, we wash our hair, we wash our clothes, and we use Bounce as a fabric softener. So the smoke hides those things. It neutralizes the chemicals that I'm wearing. So smoke is really important, but how you use it is equally important. And I think many times in beginner classes, we overlook just how to use a smoker. And I think sometimes we use it as a weapon when many times we need to use it as a tool. So I'll leave the smoker stuff to the side for a minute and go over the third thing that we need, which is a hive tool, okay? Now when I started beekeeping with my grandfather, we used these. They have now evolved with a style that has this J hook, and I strongly recommend that people get this style because it helps me work more efficiently in the hive. I can pry those frames up a lot more quickly, and I reduce my chances of getting stung that way. And so that is why I recommend this J hook. But as you can tell, I've certainly used this one in the past. And when I'm in third world countries, I'll use a knife, if I have to, because their technology is such that they don't have easy access to bee supply companies. And all that really matters here is that a knife or some kind of instrument is helping me work between the frames more efficiently and reducing my chances of getting stung. That's what the hive tool is about. So again, 3 things that beekeepers always need: a hive tool, smoker, and veil of some sort. So beginners tend to have a great deal of anxiety and apprehension when it comes to working with bees. And so many beekeepers will feel more comfortable starting with gloves. I really encourage beginners to, once they move past that initial stage of apprehension, to move past this. And the reason why is this: when bees sting, they have a venom sac with an alarm pheromone. And that alarm pheromone, once it is pulled out of that bee's body, is just like waving a flag and saying, "Here I am." So for instance, if I'm wearing my gloves and a bee stings me here, then that stinger gets embedded in that leather. And now anytime I wave my arm or my hand, that pheromone is just dissipating into the environment, which of course then attracts that poor bee's sisters. So one of the things then that you'll see many beekeepers working with their hands. And that's why, because if I get stung on my hand, then one of the things that I can do is I can take my smoker and I can smoke that area and dissipate that alarm pheromone. The other thing that I can do is I can take rubbing alcohol and do the same thing. I can rub that area and basically neutralize that alarm pheromone. So many times beginners will start with gloves. We really encourage them to move beyond that. I will say this though: if you're going to start with gloves, get good quality gloves. Don't go cheap, because if you get stung, then you're going to get stung repeatedly. And so you may as well have really good quality gloves so that you can withstand that. All right. If you get cheap gloves, then you're going to feel those a little bit more, and it's going to make you a little bit more apprehensive. So that's my advice when it comes to gloves. If you're going to have gloves, then go good quality. Don't go cheap on these. There are 3 types of ways that a beginner can get into beekeeping. And one of the most popular ways is a swarm, which I unfortunately can't catch and bring into this room. But that is first of all, what's exciting about swarms is that they are one of the most beautiful sights in nature. I mean, when you see a swarm happen, then it's like seeing divine forces in action. And many beginners start that way because, first of all, those bees are free. Secondly, they are acclimated to the region, and so they don't have very many transition problems. And then third, it's just a fun way. It's primal. It's like fishing. You know, you get together with another old beekeeper and you go chasing a swarm. And in some cases, you know, if the swarm has landed in somebody's doghouse, then you get to be a hero because you're removing that person. You know, you're removing those bees from that doghouse. So that is a common way to get started with beekeeping, is to go swarm catching with your local bee association members. Bees are not defensive when they're in swarms, which is another good thing about them. They just want to have a home, so they're not really angry or, you know, they certainly don't want to sting. They are at their most docile when they're in a swarm state. But other beekeepers want to have a little bit more structure to how they start. And so what we have here on this table are the two common ways that people get started when they want some very clear start dates. And one of these is the package bees, and then the other is the 5-frame nook. I'm going to start with the package bees first. Package bees are just like they say. They come in 3-pound or 5-pound packages. They generally are cheaper. They are going to run you about $100. And what you get in a package bee is a mated queen and a bunch of older workers. And so when you have a spring like we have had this year, when you get packages in May, we've had fairly good weather. We've had nice, you know, long summer days where the bees can get out and work and bring in pollen and nectar. Then the bees can kind of build up quickly. But if you have springs where there's a lot of rainy weather, then sometimes packages don't do quite as well because those older workers are going to die and die quickly. And so sometimes this package won't build wax quickly enough for the queen to start laying eggs. But nonetheless, you know, many people start here because it's cheaper compared to going with nooks. The second way that beekeepers will get started is to go with a 5-frame nook. That word nook is short for nucleus, and it basically is a nucleus of an established colony. And what you get with nooks are overlapping generations. So you're going to pay more for nooks. You get brood, you get a mated queen, you get established foragers, sometimes you get the male drones in here, but in essence, you get an established colony. And so for many beekeepers, beginners especially, I advise them to go with nooks. You pay more for them. Nooks now are running about $150 for 5 frames, but you have that middle generation, and you have those brood frames, you have those babies in there. And if you have an extended rainy weather spell where those workers can't get out and work and they end up dying, you've got a new generation coming on. So the nooks can help beekeepers kind of through those initial trouble spots when it comes to those early unpredictable spring weather. But as I said, you will pay more for your nooks. And sometimes your nooks can, especially if they're coming from out of state, sometimes you can end up getting a disease, and so you do have to do some monitoring of your nooks when you get them. Make sure that they look healthy, you know, examine those brood frames. And lately I haven't seen very many problems with nooks at all. So if you're a beginner and you've got your package and you've got your nook, or you have one or the other, you still have to get them established. So one of the things that you're going to need 5 components when it comes to establishing a hive. And the first one that we start with is the screened bottom board. And this is important because this screen is actually a form of pest control. Bees have mites now, and this screen bottom board allows the bees to groom themselves, and the mite falls through the screen and that helps the bees stay healthier. So first and foremost, you want a screened bottom board, okay? You can make it, you can take converted equipment, because I know that a lot of beekeepers are into getting equipment from their grandparents. It's been sitting in a barn somewhere, and a lot of the bottom boards weren't screened because mites didn't show up in North America until the 1980s. So you can make it, but the whole point there is making sure that that screen bottom board is there so that those mites can fall through that screen. Second thing that you're going to need is a super. Now, people of my grandparents' generation had a taller super we call a deep brood box. I recommend that beginners go with a medium because I think those deeps are really heavy and they can be intimidating for beginners. And there's so much freedom now. There's so many more options for beginners than there used to be when I started beekeeping with my grandfather. I mean, it used to be that you had to go with those deeps, but now, I mean, conventional wisdom is to go with the type of equipment that you feel comfortable with. And so for many beekeepers, that means going with mediums or even shallows. The bees don't care where they live. They just need shelter. And what I find with the deeps is that sometimes beginners are so intimidated then they won't check their hives. And so I really encourage them to consider other types of hives. Then you're going to need frames. And I have a mishmash of both plastic frames and wooden frames. The bees don't care. Again, they evolved 135 million years ago. They can handle these differences. But for me and my bees on surface mine sites, I find that the plastic frames tend to work better for me because as I'm bouncing up those roads, then my wax doesn't fall out of these wooden frames. But again, it's personal preference. You will need them. That's the point there. And bees like to build off of this foundation. And so that's your third thing. Fourth thing that you need is an inner cover. Now this inner cover is more about human comfort level. I mean, the bees would go on and work this hive if you didn't have it. But what it does is give them an added layer of insulation and protection. A lot of times the guard bees will come up here and they will keep ants at bay. They will keep small hive beetle at bay. So in addition to that, as a beekeeper, I have a little bit more time to smoke these bees as I'm going into the hive if I have this inner cover. So that's why we have this. And then finally, a top cover. I've seen all kinds of things used as top covers. I've seen roofing shingles used as top covers. I've seen aluminum, but the big thing here is that you provide some kind of shelter for them from the elements, from the, when you think about what bees go through. And nowadays, we suggest that beekeepers put their hives right in the middle of direct sunlight because of small hive beetle. They do need some kind of cover. What we don't have up here is a water source. Bees need water, not for the reason that people think that they need them for. A lot of times bees need water in the summertime because they need to keep that hive cool. And so they're going to go for the muckiest cow ponds that are around. But, sometimes people, I think, get hung up. They want absolutely crystal clear water. Bees just need water. And they will use it to keep the hive cool. So it's not as if they are always ingesting it. So you don't necessarily have to worry about that. But they do like to have, like I said, some kind of mucky old cow pond is where they will get their moisture from. And I'm trying to think of other things. Some tips. Young bees, young nooks are going to need to be fed. So, there are a couple of different ways to feed. I tend to like to use freezer bags, but you can also use those glass jars. My problem with feeding in glass jars is that a lot of times you have to feed in the front, and then raccoons will get into it and knock it over, or the ants will get into it. And so I find that sometimes freezer bags are just a nice way around that. Sometimes you can take that jar and put it right on top of your bees. Obviously, what you would do is you would add another super to this contraption, put your jar here, and then put your lid on top of the whole thing, and then that reduces robbing from other bees. It reduces raccoons and skunks and other kinds of things wanting to get at that sugar water. And then I've mentioned small hive beetle. So I brought a small hive beetle trap, and that looks like this. And this is like about $1. And what you would do is fill this trap with vegetable oil, and you would put it right in the center, and it has these two little claws that kind of wrap around the wooden frame. And then what happens is that the guard bees will drive the small hive beetle into these slits in the trap. And so that is an organic way of treating small hive beetle. The other thing that beekeepers want to do, beginners especially, when they have a nook or a package, is once they install them, is to take powdered sugar and dust those bees with powdered sugar, because I've already talked about varroa mites, and all bees have varroa mites now, and so then that's kind of a quick way of getting a mite drop at the beginning of the season. And that helps those bees get established too. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the diversity of hives available. I like to tell many audiences that you don't have to be a beekeeper in the traditional way of keeping bees to keep bees. What I have on this table is a top bar hive, a mason beehive, and a bumble bee hive. Because I think sometimes sometimes the logistics of dealing with the weight of a regular honeybee colony in the middle of summer, when this particular super can weigh, 90 pounds, is just not in people's realm of experience, especially if they're older or if they have back disabilities or something like that, or they just don't want to get stung. So what I have here are some different types of hives that reduce people's chances of getting stung, but at the same time gives people the benefits of pollination. So let's start with the top bar hive. This is actually an ancient form of a hive. It developed in Africa, like I say 10,000 years ago, and many organic beekeepers in the United States have really developed a fondness for top bar hives. It is an active, burgeoning community, and we have two of the noted top bar hive specialists coming to EKU this summer, July the 21st through the 28th. I say July 21st, I meant to say July 28th through August the 1st. And what that is, top bar hives basically just let the bees make their own comb. You have a top bar, just as the name of the hive suggests, and it's tapered here in the center. And this taper, sometimes beekeepers will take a bead of wax along that taper and just to get the bees started drawing out their own wax. But sometimes you can also give them a head start by forming a piece of comb here in some kind of holder. And then, from then on, the bees make their own wax, okay? So once you get them started, then they start building this wax out across the board. So rather than go up, as the bees tend to do in this type of hive, which is called a movable frame hive, the bees go across. And for many people, they prefer top bar hives because you never get the numbers of bees that your conventional hive will get. It tends to move across. So people with, like in wheelchairs or with back problems, with that, those kinds of issues, they really like this. And then because you never get the numbers, then you never get the guard bees, right? Which is what the guard bees tend to be, the ones that sting. So a lot of beginners have kind of adapted. They really have liked the top bar hives. You can get honey production, but probably it's not going to happen until the second year with these bees, with these hives, I should say. The bees are the same. They don't care where they live, but it's the type of hive that you have to decide what your goals are. Do you want pollination? Do you want honey production? Do you want wax production? Because many organic beekeepers like the fact that the bees are building wax here, and they feel like conventional beeswax that they buy from a bee supply company has pesticides in it, and that this is more organic because the bees are building the wax themselves. So the other thing to remember with top bar hives are generally you're going to have to start with package bees when it comes to top bar hives. Sometimes that can be a little difficult to get them started because the package bees will fly away before they've established themselves. But this year it seems to have been a pretty good year for people getting into top bar hives and the success that they have had with keeping package bees in them. The second hive up here is called a mason beehive. Mason beehives are native to North America. They are a beautiful denim blue bee, and they are great for pollination. So if you don't care about honey production or you don't want to get stung, for 20 bucks, I tell people you can be a beekeeper without having to learn to light a smoker, without having to lift heavy equipment, and without ever having to get stung. And one of the things that I like to show people, the reason why it's called a mason bee, is that once the female mates, she goes inside the hive, she lays her female eggs here, she lays her male eggs here, she plugs up that door, right? Hence the name mason, and then she has done what she's supposed to do for the year. So you can see this terracotta door here is why we call these bees the mason bees. But they're also called blue orchard bees, and they are native to North America. They are very good pollinators. And for people who have these large gardens, like especially in eastern Kentucky, I get garden envy when I'm riding around. This is a perfectly fine hive to have for pollination. It will not give you honey production, but it will, for 20 bucks, it will give you the pollination that you want for your beans and your tomatoes and your pumpkins and things like that. The third type of hive is called a Bumble Bee Hive, and I have not been successful at getting a bumblebee queen to live in it, but this is what it looks like. And because here in the United States, we tend not to focus on these native bees as much. I need to call my friend Rick Besson, who is here at UK. But I've been using my British bee books, and they say to start bumblebee houses with a mouse nest, with a rat's nest. So inside here is a rat's nest that I found at the bottom of one of my beehives. And I said, okay, I will try to get a bumblebee in there. And so far, I haven't had one take. But bumblebees are great pollinators. And of course, they are native to North America. And North America has 4,000 native bees. And I do want to recommend my colleague here at UK, Rick Besson, because he is the native bee specialist. Bumblebees are his thing. And I just like to include them in any kind of talk about beekeeping to remind people about the diversity of bees, that we don't have just one bee out there. We have 20,000 around the world, and North America is blessed to have 4,000 of them. And so finally, I want to just kind of end with a word of caution. These are EpiPens, and I think that every beekeeper should have one available. If not for yourself, then for that person who may come over to visit and just want to stick his or her head in a hive and may not know that he or she is allergic. Because, just like a hive is a collection of chemicals, so is the human body. And that human body's chemical makeup can change very quickly. And you may not be allergic one time, but as we age, of course, the chemicals within our body change. And so having an EpiPen in your truck or in your bee toolbox is just smart politics all the way around. You know, you hope that you never have to use it, but if in fact you do need to use them, you know, that's not the time to go and get a prescription, right? You need to have it then and there. So I always kind of like to add this to the list, not because I want to preach gloom and doom, but because bees do sting, and you never know when you're going to need it. Thank you.